the 250th episode of AEW. All those people saying that AEW wasn't going to last and it was a house of cards and I give it 6 months. Well, AEW had their 250th episode last night. Congratulations to Tony Khan and AEW. And there is a lot to get into from that show last night.
I agree. And I hope they have 250 more. I enjoyed the show. I enjoy 90% of all Dynamites. Last night was a solid show. Little Rock got an amazing card. And, wrestling was the key. What do you think about that, David? Just wrestling was the key of the marquee last night on television.
Well, I mean, the first 59 minutes and 58 seconds of the show, Tommy, was dominated by two of the best on the roster, and that's Will Ospreay and MJF, and we have a new international champion in MJF. So congratulations to MJF. And we were all wondering, all right, MJF is back. What are they doing with MJF? Is MJF going to have a place at All In? Well, right now, MJF has gold around his waist.
Mental preparation to know you have to wrestle for an hour is insane. My trainer, Johnny Rod's, kind of the graduating gift was you had to go an hour. It was in the back of your mind once you started training, right? And it's like, man, I got to do this for 1 hour. It's hard. I have to recall how many hour-long matches I've ever had in front of an audience is next level. And I'm talking not only physical preparation, mental preparation. My first one of any consequence was against Shane Douglas for the ECW world title. And we went an hour and 13. And let me tell you, like, there's points where you're trying to get energy and you really do need to feed it off the fans. And I'm talking when you're like 48 in, because now you're thinking about that clock. I love what they did where they didn't constantly remind you about the match was, going this long time. It kind of happens unexpectedly. Whenever you also have like a challenge, a 10-minute challenge, a 20-minute challenge, there's usually a clock where you could see. But those two guys tore it up. It was a masterful piece of art. I really, really enjoyed it. You're also then got to say, I'm going an hour with one of the best wrestlers, perceived to be one of the best wrestlers, if I'm MJF. And then I don't know what Will Ospreay's thinking, but like there's also, hey, self-doubt. Can I go an hour? When was the last time I went an hour? But those two guys crushed it. The hardest part about going an hour, one, psychology, in the sense of how are we going to keep the people interested in 1 hour? Also, two, conditioning and stamina. They never took their foot off the pedal. And towards the end, they had as much energy as they did in the beginning. Will Ospreay is this amazing talent. Anyone ever questions the in-ring ability of MJF again, you deserve to get smacked in your face. That guy can go. He's entertaining. And the best part about what MJF did, he also worked as a heel. He had the people still booing him. And then at the final seconds, he pulls it out and cheats to win this classical, historical match and gets the people the reaction you wanted. Boos. Also for people to be, if you watch about, man, I don't know the actual time, they start standing. And then they're standing the entire time. The fight in the crowd was great. There was so many great aspects of that match for in-ring psychology. I loved it. I really did. It was a great, masterful piece of art that two guys went out there in their prime and tore it up. And if this is why I say, like, you have to attend wrestling events, because you could say you were there. You could say you were there to see this. Dave, I could always say, hang on my head all the time. I saw Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat go an hour. I was with my dad. It was an amazing, amazing time. They probably went like 55. But like what I'm saying is, I know I was there to see somebody go an hour. I was just having this conversation on Tuesday with Steve Carino because him and I used to go an hour. But it was a lot of comedy, a lot of stuff because I was hurt, but I'm still out there performing for an hour. Followed up right after that, Rob Van Dam versus Jerry Lynn in a wrestling masterpiece that would go no less than 35 to 40 minutes of just great pure wrestling. And you saw that last night. That was a match that will hold up through time. An amazing representation for AEW on a special anniversary show as well.
It's one of those matches, Tommy, and I went ballistic on a caller yesterday when it came to Sting and Flair about generation not caring. But when you have certain masterpieces in certain matches, and me, Tommy, as a fan, I get emotional. This is my life. Pro wrestling is my life. There's certain matches that to me just will always stand the test of time. And you could go through the list of those matches. And like you said, Tommy, there's matches that you got to see live that are going to be special to you. When you look at the short history of AEW, this match is going to be, at the top or at least near the top. And I'm going to be asking the nation later on about, do you think it's the greatest AEW match ever? Because a lot of people are saying that it is. And I'm open to have that discussion, and we could compare it to some of the greatest matches so far in the 5-year history of AEW, Tommy. This is one of those special matches that I truly believe will be remembered. And there's a few things from what you just said. One is the conditioning. It's to see Will Ospreay and MJF, and obviously during the match there were times you saw that they were exhausted, but do things in the ring as if they were 3 minutes into the match, and here they are 55, 56 minutes into the match. It just shows you the athleticism, but the stamina and the conditioning of both Will Ospreay and MJF. And really, to me, this performance, and Will Ospreay was absolutely fantastic. I'm not taking anything away from Will Ospreay, but you just said it too, Tommy. Once again, MJF proving everybody wrong. MJF, here's a guy that, what was everybody's complaint about MJF? He's great on the microphone, but is he great in the ring? He's amazing on the mic, but he's okay in the ring. Well, look what MJF has been able to accomplish with AEW. He had the dog collar match with Punk. That's one of my all-time favorite matches, which is just
Same brain, dude.
Yeah, all-out brawl, bloody, just slugging each other out type of a match. Then you have a technical masterpiece where he goes an hour with a Bryan Danielson, and then he matches the athleticism of a Will Ospreay last night. And listen, Tommy, I'm not going to get back into the conversation that you and I had with Mark Henry on Monday about generational talent. And I know that MJF calls himself a generational talent. It's kind of hard to argue that when you see his body of work, what he's able to do outside the ring, what he's able to do on the microphone, and then what he's able to do inside the ring. It's amazing how this guy keeps proving everybody wrong.
That's why I say if you doubt his in-ring ability, you deserve to get smacked in your face. You could break down anything. There was parts of that match that I was like, this is beautiful. Even like some of the reversals where MJF went for like a clothesline, then it turns into like a Spanish fly. Like I was like, how did that even happen? And this was so late in the match. There's this new thing that the kids like to do where they take a bump and they get knocked out and they jump back up on their feet, or they don't take a bump and it's like I'm knocked out and they're like standing there. And I have only seen one person be knocked out on their feet, and the only thing that was holding them up was the ropes. And I don't like it. I think it makes it look hokey. I think it makes wrestling at times look fake. Both guys made the I'm going down to go up real looking. The way he was selling, I would say MJF. He took a move and then he bounces up and he's like he's trying to get to his feet. The psychology of taking a big move and then rolling towards the ropes as you're going to go get pinned. That match gave you a lot. When we talk about generational, I think that's going to be a generational match where I say, listen, man, I got to sit there and see Dean Malenko versus Eddie Guerrero. I got to sit there and watch Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis, Rey Mysterio versus Juventud Guerrero. I would watch Chris Jericho, Too Cold Scorpio, one of the pit bulls, like do things that I was just like, oh my God, like this. And I had the best seat because I was there and I would get these matches all the time. And these are one of those matches that's going to hold up. These are one of those matches that if I was a wrestling fan and I used to do this, I would VCR everything. But then like how you would have your laminated lists, then as I got in the business, this would be a match that I would study. This would be a match also that if I'm ever bored, I would take a VCR tape and put it in and watch. And those matches are Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair versus Terry Funk, Barry Windham versus Ric Flair. Of course, keep on remembering this one standard that I'm putting out there. It's Ric Flair, Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat versus Rick Rude in their Iron Man. Steve Austin, Bret Hart, Bret versus Owen. When you just talk about like one of the best matches of all time of AEW, I kind of think I know some of your choices. I know you say the biggest match of all time, Cody versus Dustin. I would say you would put Thunder Rosa and Britt up there.
Mm-hmm.
Bryan Danielson and MJF.
Yes.
This match is way up there. And I mean, also matches that I've watched, many Young Bucks matches where I'm just blown away. I remember a specific Motor City Machine Gun Young Bucks match. Will Ospreay versus Josh Alexander in TNA was super duper special. This was a special match, man. It really and truly was. This show was started because of Okada and Omega.
Well, the
conversation with you and Bubba.
Yeah, I mean that kind of drove Bully and I to do this show together because he heard on the air me say that match was one of the greatest championship matches I had ever seen, and he called me not on the show but after the show and said, "Here's the reasons why I don't think it was," and one of the things was about the fighting that was happening outside the ring, and you got that last night. I always buy in when it comes to the refereeing because I know that is a bit of a soft spot. Dude, I was watching Terry Funk and Flair. It wasn't the I Quit match. It was another match where Tommy Young was the referee. And Flair and Funk were brawling outside the ring. But they were brawling outside the ring. And Tommy Young wasn't counting. He was telling them to get back into the ring. But then later on, it was an instance where Funk threw Flair out and was beating on Flair. And then there was the count. Where it's almost like referees' discretion. It's like, all right, they're brawling, so I'm going to lay off. But here's where one wrestler has the advantage over the other and throwing them out of the ring, I'm going to count. I always say that in mainstream sports too, Tommy, right? What's a foul in one game may not be a foul in another game. Or, maybe a referee is going to be like, you know what? I'm not going to call pass interference here because of this game, or certain referees have certain ways that they call it. Listen, it's not an exact science, but in a match like we saw last night, did it bother me? It really didn't. I'm going to be completely honest because it was the flow of the story and the flow of the match. Like what do you always hear commentators say, Tommy, in the NFL? Every single play, somebody's holding. Somebody's holding. Then why isn't there a flag on every play if every play there's somebody holding? I'm willing to kind of give that a pass. And the reason I'm willing to give it a pass is because of everything else I saw in that match last night. They made magic. And, are you going to have a double count out in a match like that? No. And we got a clean victory. And that's the other thing I wanted to talk about, Tommy, from that match last night was the swerve. if all you had to do is look at social media and everybody's like, all right, this is going to be a time limit draw. I thought it was going to be a time limit draw, Tommy. I'm sure you thought it was going to be a time limit draw. And then MJF gets the pinfall victory with 59 minutes and 58 seconds on the clock. Wow. And that, I think that got everybody. I don't think anybody went into that match thinking that MJF was going to be your new champion coming out of it, but that's exactly what happened last night.
I agree. Listen, man, October this year, I'll be wrestling 35 years. If I was in the back, I would have waited for those guys to come back. I would have been the first person to hand them water, give them a standing ovation, and say thank you for that performance. I would have also said the same thing to the referee, because the referee's out there doing his job for an hour. That's a hard thing to do as well. I don't play into the referee stuff, all the stuff, because then you could say the same thing about the table. It's all, if you really want to get that, then you have to, this match will be competed under pure rules. People make a big deal about referee stuff like that. I can't, because then I'm a hypocrite, because I literally before this match watched me and Steve Corino do something with Francine, and the referee dropped down on all fours so Francine can jump off of his back because she said, do it. And he did.
But Tommy, what do I get shit for? Because it actually did take me out of the match, but I get shit for it all the time. People regard it as not only one of the greatest WrestleMania matches, but maybe one of the greatest matches ever. Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat. Outside interference from George the Animal Steele blatantly. During the pinfall, he's still hanging on the ropes on the apron.
Right.
You know, what to me, the greatest WrestleMania match of all time, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Undertaker and Shawn Michaels were outside the ring for 5 minutes. They were outside the ring for. Why aren't people yelling and screaming about, well, that should have been a double count out, or that should have been a no contest? Because the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels were outside the ring for 5 minutes. It's when it comes to pro wrestling, Tommy, you can nitpick, but then if you're going to do that, then you almost have to pick and choose. Because when you go through history, like, there's going to be matches like that. And listen, that's fine. You could have your opinion. But after the classic I saw last night, I am not gonna hang on the refereeing, because that was beautiful what I saw last night in the ring.
If I could, for ECW, man, we had Jim Molyneux, John Finnegan, Keenan was one of our refs, and there was a core too, right? But also when we brawled in the crowd, they were our line of defense. They were also helping tell the people, get out of the way, get out of the way. In WWE, man, I work with some of the best referees of all time. Jimmy Corderas, Mike Chioda. We also knew, like, those guys had our backs. If a fan is coming to the ring, you've seen clips on the internet of fans hitting the ring. That first line, because we're the wrestlers, we're in the mix. It's those referees' jobs. And if the referees didn't do it, they knew they'd get their asses handed by the boys. How did you not have my back there? I don't go that way again, also because, Dave, for the same thing. I could point out, I'm not the rules police, but I could go back and point out so many annals in time where, wait, that was right in front of the referee. I would say it all the time with Sheamus. When Sheamus bends the guy over the rope and does his clubs to the chest and the people count 10, well, at 5, he should have been disqualified, right? But because it's Sheamus, they let it go. That stuff does not bother me. Never does. I also don't take wrestling that seriously because, like I said, it's that's the part of the show. You can't go that deep into the weeds on certain things. When referees blow calls, yes, because it affects the show outcome, finish, flow. But that match, man, like, even at one point I saw that they were brawling outside, and then Ospreay left him just to duck under the ropes to break up the count. I said it didn't bother me. Didn't bother me at all. If you're going to nitpick, then that's okay. That's your prerogative. That became more apparent with social media. Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and listen, I don't want to harp on it too much because I really want to get into the nuts and bolts of what we saw. And a lot of things that a lot of people said that certain wrestlers and even AEW in general weren't great at, and I saw it last night. One was the camera work. I've been critical of the camera work at times with AEW. The camera work could not have been better in that match, inside and outside the ring. So kudos to them. And Paul just sent me this message, and it's true. A lot of people, the criticism with Will Ospreay is his selling. Will Ospreay did a tremendous job last night of selling, especially that shoulder during the course of that match. So, again, if you're going to go that long, you're going to have to show the struggles of going that long. And I thought both MJF and Will Ospreay did that. Another kudos I got to throw out, Tommy. And, to me, the greatest match of all time in my eyes was the I Quit match with Terry Funk and Ric Flair. One of the reasons why is commentary. Jim Ross and Gordon Solie, the two best that ever did it on commentary, really did a phenomenal job. Kudos to Tony Schiavone and especially Taz on commentary during that match. They helped tell the story of that match and each individual and the struggles of what was going on. I cannot compliment Tony Schiavone and Taz more than I can, because honestly, they did a phenomenal job.
Talking about, going after a guy's leg. Why? Because, hey, a lot of his movements are explosive or, springboards, all that stuff. How's he going to be able to do it when he's got a bad wheel? Or when you're so deep into a match, time-wise, the shoulder, how are you going to go for the sling blade? Do you know how many people wake up and they're like, oh, my shoulder hurts? Think if you're doing so, if you're shadow boxing for 1 hour, if you're running for 1 hour, see how your body reacts. I mean, these are simple things to do to test, kind of sort of what goes through somebody's physical endurance when you're dealing with this. Again, when I started off, preparation. Are you mentally able to go an hour? Maybe. Physically, that's a whole other thing. You got to prepare for that. You have to be, hey, let's hit the ropes for 10 straight minutes. So I know my wind is going to be there. Let me go 30 to 40 minutes to see. And on live events, that's where you'd be able to do it. AEW doesn't do live events. Though both those guys, however they trained for that match, wherever they did it, kudos to them. They had the will, the stamina to continue to go and never show any weakness. And I enjoyed the aftermath with the oxygen, with everybody telling, because it was exhaustion. It was a great piece of work, man. I really enjoyed it.
And even like with Will Ospreay near the end of that match, where he could clearly have won if he hit him with the Tiger Driver. But he made that promise that he would never do the Tiger Driver. Everything that happened with Bryan Danielson, he wouldn't do the Tiger Driver. And he had him up. And obviously, Tommy, if he hit it, he would have won the match. But he decided not to. Like, that's going to haunt him now, where you could do something interesting moving forward with Will Ospreay if you want to, and how he was conflicted. And I love how Tony and Taz were saying that you never would have gotten that from MJF, but you get it from a Will Ospreay because of his class, the sportsmanship, him making that promise. But in the end, it bit him in the ass and it caused him to lose the match. That's a story that you can have moving forward. And then you have the ring coming into play, where I don't necessarily think you needed to have the ref bump at the end of the match. I think MJF could have still clocked Will Ospreay with that ring, because the way he did it, he did a great job concealing it. Don't know if you necessarily needed that ref bump, but it doesn't matter because it was right at the end of the match and MJF pulled off the 1, 2, 3. But that's going to be a story moving forward. And the biggest thing you said, Tommy, was him coming out there as a heel, MJF. When MJF came out there last night, I would say the crowd was about 50-50. He was getting booed, but there were still people that were cheering MJF. When he won that match, there were no cheers for MJF. Like, you could tell, Tommy, that as that match went on, even the people who were cheering MJF were siding with Will Ospreay. They checked every box with that match last night, and we talk about hey, what's AEW's strength? It's match quality. Well, you got that. And you got that in droves. But what are one of the things that we complain at times about AEW? Storytelling, who's the babyface, who's the heel. That was clear as day for the first half of that show last night. And obviously they have stories moving forward. And now MJF is right back where he should be, near the top of the card for AEW. And Will Ospreay coming out of that match is going to be more loved, and MJF is going to be more hated. Like I said, they checked every box in that match last night, Tommy. It is, you can say, one of the greatest matches in AEW history without a doubt.
I would like to ask you this and ask the nation. Would you want to see Will Ospreay versus MJF 2? And would you want to see Will Ospreay finally hit his Tiger Driver 91? And where would that probably take place? In his hometown, in front of the biggest, crowd you could be. But again, coming off of that masterpiece, would you want to see the rematch?
I think that's all anybody wants to see, and I would be shocked if we get anything else but that at Wembley at All In.